Everyone, thanks for joining us again today. This is our, I think, fourth Cyber Smart Dealers webinar. For those who haven't tuned in before or seen me before, my name's Ashley. I'm the Communications Manager at the AADA, and I'll hand you over to Brian in a second, but I'll just do a couple of housekeeping things first. So the session will be recorded like our other ones. It'll be available on the AADA website for viewing at a later date if you or anyone else wants to do that. Brian and we really encourage participation from everyone throughout this. So if you've got any questions that come up as we go along, you can use the raise your hand function, or you can use the chat option to ask questions. If you do the raise your hand, I'll just give you permission to talk for a bit so you can ask your questions and have a discussion, and then you'll get muted again, of course, so I don't, keep hearing from you. So our expert today, and for everything cyber safety, is Brian Hay. You might remember him from our previous webinars in this series. Brian's with Cultural Cybersecurity, our major partners in this project. And I'm going to hand you over to Brian to take things from here. He's going to introduce the topic. I think it's one that a lot of us are keen to hear more on, and it's particularly sort of relevant to the industry at the moment. So, Brian, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you very much, Ash. Privilege, and thanks everyone for giving up that valuable time in your day to share it with me. So I will get underway. And someone just confirm for me that you can see this first slide, okay?
Yep, I can.
And it still looks like a full screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. So folks, business email compromise fraud. Now, I understand a lot of the audience are dealers, and this is our fourth webinar. And now, look, I apologize. I may repeat a couple of slides, but not many, but I think that the ones if I have repeated them to you, it's worth going over again. So I hope I'm not being boring and I'm just regurgitating for the sake of things, because different people come on at different times, and there are a few salient points that I'd like to make. So please be patient with me and gentle. BEC fraud, it is far bigger than what most people understand it to be, because you only see a glimpse of what's happened in your environment, and so many times you've been attacked and your software may be diverting or deflecting those attacks. But it continues to grow, and it is continuing to be a problem. And in essence, it really targets the finance and HR payroll teams. And what we can expect is that the challenge is only going to get greater as more criminals come into this space, because it is so profitable. So let's get underway, and I'm going to start with something I may have repeated before, and that's phishing. And because most BEC fraud starts with a phishing, through a phishing communication or an email communication. And we'll go a little bit into the history of where it began, how it formed, and then how it evolved, and the different actors that play in the space now. And we'll go through a couple little case studies and look at one interesting case of an offender who's now in prison, but was extraordinarily successful and extremely wealthy from it. So phishing, as we know, is the act of attempting to acquire information, usernames, passwords, and credit card details by masquerading as a trustworthy entity. It's fundamentally the greatest social engineering attack that we are subjected to every hour of every day, basically. And once was purely emails, now it's of course in SMS with text messages. So I'm going to go through a very simple process, and it's with social engineering, it's not about intelligence, it's about trust and how that trust is manipulated. And it's about how in our busy lives, it's so easy to miss small details in email communications if we are not truly switched on to the challenge. So, for example, can you please read for me out loud, whilst you're sitting in front of the computer, the words contained in the blue triangle? Read it out aloud. A bird in the bush. Now read it out aloud again. A bird in the bush. Now read it out really slowly, one word at a time. A bird in the bush. Now I'm going to suggest there would be numerous people on this call that did not read the second "the." And what that tells me is that you're incredibly smart and your brain is operating with great efficiency because your brain saw that there were two "these," realized one wasn't relevant and cut it out. Okay, so don't give yourself an uppercut that says, why didn't I pick that up? Your brain actually did it, discounted it for you. What words do you see when you look at the top in the white? Do you see the word good or do you see the word evil? I just want to point out that if you saw the word evil first, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, good or evil. What about the bottom? Do you see the word optical or do you see the word illusion? Now, we are all looking at the same thing, but we are seeing different things. How many F's can you count in the sentence finished files as a result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of years? How many F's? Most people, I suggest, are saying 3 or 4. But in fact, there are 6, because what happens is, again, your brain is racing ahead and it's not counting the little connecting words, the ofs, OF, and there are 3 of those. So again, we're looking at it, but we're not seeing it. Can you read this? Only smart people can read this. Couldn't believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University. It doesn't matter in what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is the first and last letter be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess and you can still read it without a problem. Blew my mind when I first read that. I thought, how nuts is this? And it just shows you the power of the brain to interpret it, even though it's complete gobbledygook officially. And this is one of the problems we have. And when we're busy, our brain supports us, obviously, and we're multitasking. And, we've really got to concentrate sometimes to pick these anomalies up. This one is obvious, but they aren't always obvious. And I just want you to watch this video, please.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball.
Only the white team.
How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you notice the gorilla?
How crazy was that? How many people counted 15 passes but didn't notice I was going to say a 6-foot gorilla, probably not quite 6 foot, in walking through the screen. And the reason I'm demonstrating all this, folks, is to focus on the point that we need to be disciplined and we need to be trained and have our minds geared for things such as business email compromise. Our email is perhaps our greatest threat and vulnerability point, other than our people, it's people through the email. And we have not developed the discipline to manage it appropriately, because things are getting through every single day that could or should be picked up. We've developed a mindset to help us get through things rapidly and pick up certain points. And sadly, cyber security discipline has not been one of those things. And that's one of the skills we need to develop, because as you saw, it's so easy for an email to be missed or a mistake to be, or anomaly not to be detected, because our brain self-corrects and we've got to change that. Now, just through some of the more technical terms of this is You know, we call it spoofing. Now, spoofing is where, and you see it more often on your mobile, through your mobile phone, if you go into your email, and it may show you the name, in this case, Pat. I've blotted, this is a real one I received. Pat received an email, and it was forwarded to me, and when I went into it, it was from Remnita Films, which is a bit of an anomaly. Now, Pat was a person who was a victim of fraud some years earlier, and I assisted them with some of the fraud situation. And this was a very clever attack. Clearly, they'd compromised Pat's computer and were using the emails within the system to then forward to those people, such as me, with a link. And it's all designed there to get me to click on that link. So Remnita Films, that's the link. And one of the things with BEC and other email threats is that nearly all the people that attack us here in Australia are overseas. So you see email communications coming in at very weird times, early hours of the morning, around midnight. So that's always an indication. And what we've got to get better at is looking at who is sending us this email and validating that process. Now, on your phone, on your mobile phone, it's right easy. You just put, not on the link, you click on the sender's email address and up will pop the real sender's email. So in this case, this display, the name was Pat, and then the email address is Remnita Films, and the rest is history. Here's one I received from, allegedly from Telstra. And look at the time, it was sent at 4:22 in the morning to my private Big Pond account. You're saying, Brian, you're breaking all the rules by telling us what your private email address is. Emails are not private. Email addresses are not private. They're like public PO boxes. So don't get hung up on that. It's what comes into those things that we need to be able to be disciplined about. So it comes from, allegedly from Telstra. You click on TLS, and then that's when you get to see the real sending out address, and it's got nothing to do with Telstra. Everything else looks perfect. You know, we've got this propensity to believe what we see, but we've got to go beyond that. We've got to get to the investigation side. Now, if this was on your computer, your PC, what you would do was right-click, go into email properties, and you'll see the same screen basically that we're looking at now. So we've got to learn the fundamental skills, or your staff do, of being able to interrogate the email system to validate. And another thing the crooks do is called typo spotting, and that's changing the letters or numbers in an email address. So my CCS email address is bhay@culturalcybersecurity.com. So if I wanted to typo spot that, I could do it simply by changing the L in cultural to a 1 and send that out. Because if you're busy, and remember, we missed the 6-foot gorilla. How easy would it be if you received an email to miss that little anomaly in a very lengthy email address? It's very easy to miss. And most of the time, people don't look first at the sending email address. They're looking, what the hell's this email all about? They're looking at the subject line. Another way you can do things is, here's one I just made up, assistedcarmody.com.au. Well, if I change the M to an R and an N, and I can make the font even smaller in a quick look, it's very easy to miss. And one of the things I'd like to point out is, we always used to teach, for many years, that most socially engineered phishing emails would not appear to you addressing you by name. It would always be Dear Clive, Dear Member, or Dear Nothing. But what we're seeing, I got this one, last year, and it was post the Optus breach, the Medibank breach, the Latitude breach. They are very much personalising them now. So they have a large database of identities, and they're using that. What's even more so the case these days, especially with BEC fraud, it's not a mass mail out generally. They are targeting a specific organisation, and they've already done their research and are targeting individuals. And the truth is that if you've got a LinkedIn profile, they know exactly where you work and what your position is. Okay, so that then tells them, it makes it even, they can be faster and smarter about the way they go about their business to do their thing. Again, this is supposed to be no reply from Telstra, and we can see it wasn't from Telstra. So that's the prep work I just wanted to get out from an email communication perspective of how we need to develop the skills and the mindset to defend ourselves from not only phishing threats, but business email compromise. Because the simple truth is this: all BEC fraud is preventable. There should never be a single dollar or cent lost, and we are losing millions. In 2021, as you can see, it grew from 2018 to 2019 to 2021. 2021 was the last official stat that I saw, 227 million. And I'm sure many of you probably heard the why presentation, and this is why it continues to grow, because there's so much money being made. Okay, now, and when these figures, this is what was reported to the ACCC, many organisations wouldn't have reported because of reputational harm. So it's going to be far greater than what those numbers show. Now, when BEC first evolved, it was very much a technical exercise. So it was a case of, and we saw a lot of the threats coming from Eastern Europe, good hackers that could hack into environments, sit inside the corporate network in the email system, and slowly take their time to see what was going through, what was going to who, intercept the emails, read the contents, the attachments, the contracts, and everything else. And that's how they formulated their early attacks. And they could then socially engineer people that they were targeting based on that information to get things, instructions, for example, to change the bank account details, or to, get invoice details changed. Then we started to see it was less technical and more social engineering with mass email rollouts. And that tended to be with the early ones. They're very large amounts, and they tend to be often in the millions of dollars and would require an overseas transfer. Whereas when we started to see the mass mail out, that was tended to be a domestic transfer. Now, the difference is the criminal group behind it has gone from the say the Eastern European hacker to the Nigerian gang fraudster. Okay, so without quite the technical skills, and they had a different approach to the crime. And of course, they were very successful and are continuing to be successful, and are making millions of dollars in the process. Key to all is harvesting the intelligence on you, finding out who's in authority, and then we've seen them go from just the invoices into payroll, into gift cards, and it will continue to evolve. So very simply, just to reinforce, the early days we saw an email account compromised by the crook. They would get the fish all the details that they needed, and then change bank account details, convince the payer to change bank account details on the invoice, and the cybercriminal received the money. Now, a very simple and example of this was a case where we had a company in Brisbane, and it was dealing with an entity in Saudi Arabia. And they had a great relationship. They were communicating the CFO in Brisbane to the project manager in Saudi, and they were coming to the end of winding up a significant project. So one day, the CFO in Brisbane received an email and was using the same vernacular, the same language. Hey, Jack, how you going? Hope Mary and the kids are well. Just want you, just to give you a final instruction. Contract 123 on the bridge account. We're setting up a new pay system for our clients in Asia Pacific, and could you please pay it into this bank account, HSBC in Hong Kong? So the CFO, everything was consistent, paid $10 million into the HSBC account as directed in Hong Kong. Within 24 hours, that $10 million was split into 14 accounts in 12 different countries, never to be seen again. And cooperation out of Hong Kong, sadly, was not great through Chinese network. and that was $10 million it walked. Whether the company survived, I don't know. I left law enforcement, but that shows you the complexity, and they were able to have globally all of these bank accounts in all these countries to allow these transfers. And of course, that's not their bank account. That would be peeled off into others, but very effective, sadly. And then the other aspect of business email compromise, and we see this with the broader mass marketing approach, is that it's very much a grooming operation and in the social engineering exercise. So what I mean by a grooming operation is that they establish a relationship by assuming a persona, and they plant the seed. So unlike a phishing email, whereas you get a communication and you're encouraged immediately to click on the link to resolve it, a grooming operation means you may get half a dozen different communications, and it might start out in the morning and says, "Hey Betty, you in today? Can you help me with something?" And I've assumed in the process, I'm assuming the relationship of maybe the CEO. So Betty sees that, well, the boss is talking, yeah, sure, I'm available. How can I help you? And the next communication might come back and say, look, I'm about to go into a meeting. I need a payment made today urgently, but I'll come back to you. And what it means is that Betty's now on the hook, and Betty is waiting for that next communication, waiting to appease the boss. And so you're on the hook and you're waiting for the next steps, and the continuing communications may be delayed towards the end of the day, and that builds a sense of urgency because this must be done by the end of the day, and excuses will come. It's designed to appear as regular business. There's no hyperlinks, but of course, then the hook will come when the payment details get made, and it is such of an urgent nature with being time poor, that's all of a sudden general processes get thrown out the window because the boss needs his stuff. So Betty is acting under the authority of the CEO. That's, I've just put together a very rough set of circumstances. So how do they get to that point? One of the big things they do, of course, is research. They look at who's who in the zoo, who's the CEO, who's the CFO, who's the deputy, who's in the position of HR payroll, who works in the finance team, how long have they worked there for, who's working on the X project, and they identify their targets. Then they will create a persona. Sometimes they'll go even to the extent of setting up a profile on LinkedIn. But they'll go and register domains even to assume the persona of a person. Then they pick their target, who they're going to try and manipulate inside the dealership in your case. Then they send the email, they personalize it. Hey Frank, how you going today? Are you in? Then often what they'll do, and we'll see that because I will share some emails with you, they may say, hey, listen, this is, we're going to do a takeover on an account. This is very confidential. Don't share it. So I isolate you. Often they may say, they may take you off the email system and say, look, let's communicate by text message or in a chat. And eventually they'll provide you with the bank details that need to be changed, and the money gets transferred, and then everything's gone. So it could be a bogus invoice that they're going to plant with you, or they could simply attack an existing email and change the billing address on that email. You might look for CEO fraud. So they're going to take identity theft from the CEO, compromise accounts. Now, this is one we haven't seen in Australia yet. I'm not aware of this occurring in Australia, but it's been bigger in the United States. Normally what happens over time, we start to see it in Australia, is attorney impersonation. Of course, solicitors and lawyers utilize trust accounts, and a lot of organizations will utilize, say, for example, in the real estate industry, usually a lot of the money is held in trust accounts. So we haven't seen it yet too much in Australia. I don't know of anything, but I expect it will happen, or it's been attempted, or it just hasn't been made public. So they do their reconnaissance and their pre-texting. They look at all of the information. They have a checklist they go through, and they wait to acquire all of that information before they execute. Some of the big known actors, I don't know where they give themselves these names, Crimson King Snakes, and he goes after law firms and debt recovery services using a variety of legitimate looking emails. And we've fallen into this trap that it looks official. So if it looks official, it must be real. Nothing's real until we validate it. So it's all about validation. Show me the proof. Cosmic links. They must be on drugs, these people. A Russian-based cybercrime threat actor doing BEC operations. Cosmic links really leverage COVID-19 and tended to involve current affairs of COVID vaccine as a theme, as a discussion point. And if you see down there in the third paragraph, we've named this acquisition project abacus, and I need to count in your discretion in this very confidential matter. Classic example of how to isolate someone within the environment to not talk to their colleagues. They want you to isolate. They do not want you to second guess. They do not want you to seek a second opinion. They want you to put you in a little cocoon where you are following their instructions completely. TrustNet Secure Service, and the fact, you think about it, you read TrustNet Secure Service, what's your natural instinct to do? Trust it. Why? Because it says you should trust it. And it's safe because it says it's secure. What you should be really looking at is the .cc, which says it's coming from a foreign country. China? Is that China? CC or Cambodia? I think it's China. It's trying to be CA. Forgive me anyway, but it's not where you think it's coming from. Okay, and just because it says secure or trust, don't believe it. Prove everything. Sorry, I'll pull that apart. Time sensitivity. Happy New Year to you and your family. Wish you great success and good health this year. The pandemic's been ravaging the world, has created dislocation in several markets. Opportunity now. I'll need your help to resolve certain time-sensitive issues. It sounds very professional, very business-like, and they're using very clever language to bring a sense of urgency to the equation. Again, urgency means you may bypass normal processes for payment of monies. I wish you a great year ahead. Again, these are real examples of these sorts of attacks. And that's what we used to see. But, it doesn't mean they're not still happening. Now, they tend to be the big ones, and they tend to involve millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands in overseas transfers. The biggest volume today is driven by what we see here in Australia is Nigerian fraud gangs. And they've just evolved, and they've seen this as an opportunity. I remember working back on Nigerian fraud matters, and they were working with Nigerian gangs with Russian fraudsters in the dark web 20 years ago, or close enough to. So they've always had a very strong relationship, and I've seen the amount of money, and they've exploited it. So I might just share with this. Some of you may not have seen this.
Lagos, Africa's biggest city. We're on a raid with Nigeria's untouchables, the crack new anti-fraud police.
You expect violence? Yes, we expect violence.
The target, an internet cafe full of scammers. These guys don't muck around. And the fraudsters don't know what's hit them.
We are sitting down. Where do you want? ID card is here. Your shop is downstairs. Leave this man. He's a fraudster. Don't mind him. This is a classic scam leader.
For years, they've been firing off scam emails and letters like this.
You would think that somebody is actually sincere about trying to transfer £15 million into your account.
But there is no £15 million.
That's no £50 million.
conning a fortune from unsuspecting victims all around the world, many in Australia. The scams and the frauds are pulling in millions of dollars from around the globe. From Queensland alone, $500,000 is coming here every month. Throw in all the other states and territories and you start to get a picture of what an amazing amount of Australian money is hitting these streets. And this is where the money goes. Today, we're on the trail of those millions. Some of the sharks are going down.
It's meant for like big boys.
This is the big
You understand? Yeah, for the big boys.
So you blokes have been sitting here scamming people, have you?
No, they stay here.
So they virtually live here
Yeah.
to keep the scam going?
Yes, sir. Right, and the password. Write the password. My password. Your password, what's wrong with you?
This is really the tip of the proverbial iceberg. There are literally hundreds of these cyber cafes littered around Lagos.
Let's get going. Please, let's do this fast so that we can get going now.
It's crucial to remove the computers. They hold thousands, even millions, of victims' emails, addresses, and phone numbers. But they have to move fast. Outside, the crowd is angry. They're on the side of the crooks. Like many round here, they depend on the scams for a living. It's getting nasty, but a couple of warning shots clear the mob. Well, that's a demonstration of what can happen when that sort of action by the EFCC is not popular among the locals. Many of that big crowd had friends inside the cyber cafe, and the others, well, they think it's pretty much fair game to scam Westerners.
So I said before, we believe what we read. It was interesting. There was just a snapshot. We set that sting up for 60 minutes. We did a couple over the years, and it's quite extraordinary. And that was in the days when they were doing the more of the classic inheritance scam, business scams, and then they've more migrated towards romance frauds, and of course now business email compromise. But their resources are vast. We could show that for every dollar that went to Nigeria, there was another $1.04 going to one of 41 different countries. And I'll take you back to that global scale when we saw that $10 million split up around the world. This is a global effort. It is global organised crime and very successful. And again, if we see something, we believe it. It's we read it, we believe it, and we've got to understand that this is an organised crime syndicate that operates at the global level. And just to give it a demonstration, one of the most notorious BEC fraudsters in more recent times was a person who, on his Instagram account, called himself Hush Puppy. And he actually became, and still is, would you believe, this blows my mind, an influencer, even though he's in custody. So he's in his Versace bathrobe in front of his luxury vehicles, bragging to the world. And this is what he would do. He would travel the world in private 6-star jets, committing crimes and putting it out there and notoriously for the world to see. Would you believe 2.5 million Instagram followers? His real name was Ramon Abbas, and he was brought up in Lagos, Nigeria, a big hub for cybercrime activities. He was very free with his money and let everyone know how successful he was. And in the early days, they used to call them the Yahoo boys, because all the email communications they started with, the domain was Yahoo, so they called them Yahoo boys. And they got a little bit of a cult following with the youth and still do in Nigeria, which is rather sad. But the criminal efforts saw them with these cars, living this sort of a lifestyle, which is quite extraordinary, traveling the world and Santorini and the like. And they used the same fundamental tricks of typo squatting, or come up with a domain that looks simple. And Hush Puppy focused very much on business email compromise, which was extremely profitable. And when he had a problem, he had a corrupt ally, a member of the Nigerian police, was very sadly that who would help leverage some activities for him. And what's really sad is when we get the situation where parents are taking their children to learn how to become Yahoo boys because they no longer want the poverty, they want the money. And that's one of the reasons why this crime type is continuing to grow, because it's very, very simple. And I've asked this question before: when was the last time you ever heard of a cyber criminal being extradited back to Australia to be held to account, even though we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars? And that's the simple thing is, it's never happened. But he would travel the world in his 6-star private jet under his Louis Vuitton blankets. But this was his downfall. He posted this image in Dubai, and an FBI operative recognized the backdrop and realized where he was. And that led to the downfall of Hush Puppy. But what's really insane is when the BBC were doing a bit of a story on Hush Puppy, his Instagram account was still open, and they contacted Instagram, and who decided not to close it. Now, how insane is that? Now, what we don't know, and I'm going off left field, but really, please forgive me, but it's insane. A lot of the big tech companies have an immunity under legislation and can't be charged, even though they may be knowingly enabling the commission of a crime. And it really reflects how, as a society globally, we still don't have our act together. Okay, and there's no excuse for it. Even in Australia, though, we've had local arrests where they've transferred money locally, and they've got here for BEC, Business Email Compromise Act, stole $1.7 million. Quite frankly, folks, these aren't the major perpetrators. Remember I said this is where the money gets transferred locally. Now, if it's transferred locally, it's what we call goes into a mule's account, a money mule. Now, many of these people, sadly, are actually victims of fraud themselves. They're romance fraud victims being manipulated by the criminals to help in these operations, and a lot of them are receiving this money and then on forwarding it with no knowledge that they're participating in a crime. Sometimes they do, of course, but it's very often the case they don't. So there's a lot more that can be done, as in our banking industry, I would argue, to stop this from occurring. That's just me getting on my platform. The simple fact is it continues to happen. There was a Nigerian gentleman sitting in at the Villawood Detention Centre in Sydney and ran a $3 million BEC fraud operation. How? Because he had access to a phone. So that's a lot about the criminality, how it continues to grow. And let's go through a few emails to demonstrate. And it could be something as simple as this: "Hi Joe, you in the office? Kindly let me know because I need you to send out an important payment for me today." Okay, how simple is that? This was one. "Hey, hello, how soon can you process an outgoing overseas payment today? Please advise some details needed. Can you get it done before cut-off?" Now, this targeted a CEO from a HQ was in Melbourne. They did all the research on the CEO's name. Ask yourself, if you got an email from the CEO, what would you do? How would it make you feel? And the thing is that we tend to get fixated on the name, where we've got to develop the discipline to look at, hang on, let's have a look at the domain. What is this email address? And investigate it. That needs to be our starting point every single time. We need to train our people so that becomes second nature. Validate, who's this sending to me? Okay, and know how to go into the real details. This was easy because it wasn't spoofed. It was simply taking the name of the CEO, taking their identity, putting it with a new domain. When I investigated this, I found that the QBVL domain net had been set up about 4 days before the emails went out. Just as I said right at the beginning, they do all their research, they do the preparation, they assume the personas, and then they start to connect. Who the person they were targeting was the finance manager inside the organisation. This was another one going after the same CEO, but they changed the domains. Again, if we look, we will find it very innocuous. Hello, you're working from home or you're at the office? Regards, Stephen. Simple that. So what's the purpose of this email? The purpose of the email is simply to get a response. If someone responds, then they're going to anticipate more communications from the fraudster, thinking it's from the boss. And sometimes we'll get an email that says it's urgent. Hello, Stuart, have you got a minute? I'm currently tied up in a meeting. We need to facilitate a wire transfer to Indonesia for payment of an invoice. Peter needs us to pay for it today. Please let me know so I can pass on further information. Thanks, regards, Scott. What they did was research the identities and Christian names of one of the key people inside this organisation that did do business with Indonesia. And it looks really cool, but what would tell you was the sending email address. Okay, the purpose of this is simply to get your attention, give you the confidence, and to then take the future instructions that become. The question is, what would you do if you received that email and it was from your organisation, from people in authority? How do you react? Would people in your organisation, are they loyal, good soldiers that comply with every instruction that they receive? Or have they been trained to question when it comes to the transfer of money and validate the direction before they part with it, even if it comes from the CEO? We need to develop cultures inside our organisation that never step outside the lines without absolute validation. And we need to give them the courage to question the CEO. And if they don't have that courage, that they go to a peer or a colleague who can talk on their behalf, because some people, especially with different cultural backgrounds, will not question. Okay, they follow because they're very loyal, but that's their makeup and their different personalities. So we need to build those support processes in the team and have a team approach to this challenge, not just put on the shoulders of individuals. Hi, Michael, please find and close vendor banking instructions. Supposed to be out the previous week. I need you to process it immediately. I'm a bit busy now. I'll give you a call within the hour regarding the payment. Again, they're just setting the trap, setting the hook. What would you do if you receive that? I'm sort of harping the message, folks, but it's absolutely about behaviour and changing our view to how to challenge these things, because a lot of people do not challenge. Some people, are fantastic. They challenge you all the damn time. We want to embrace that, okay? And again, just more examples of directions for money. And I've asked the question here, how does it make you feel if you got an email from the CEO? Now, the truth is, some people will feel intimidated. Some people will feel it's normal business. Other people will feel that pride. Wow, the CEO has reached out to me to get this done. I'm not going to let them down. And they take great stock, and their chest puffs up and they feel privileged to actually, the CEO knows who they are and trusts them to do this job. So they want to do a damn good job for the boss. So it makes different people feel differently about this. And that's what we've got to appreciate, that we're not all the same. We have different personalities and we have different emotional responses. This was one that was a client of mine received this one, and have a look at it. He said his email is from Taurus Secure MX providers. It was that Russian crazy cat using the merger of a company using coronavirus. Purpose of the email is simply to isolate, get a response, and so we can start to execute. And then we saw, of course, once like this: good morning, hope your day is filled with stars and unicorns. I recently switched banks, want to change my current payroll information to my new account. Kindly advise what I need to forward. Regards, Director Annie of Operations. Now, someone said to me a little while back that said, Brian, we know that's fake because no one says filled with stars and unicorns. And I said, Annie did. And that's it. If they can capture parts of your personality, and if your normal salutation or greeting is all about stars and unicorns, and you are known for stars and unicorns, then that actually validates in people's minds that it's definitely you, because they miss looking at the typo squatting in the sending email address. Officers, the I has been replaced. with a 1. So what are the signs and what does it tell us? They're setting up for a business email compromise. In the early days, a few years back, we started to see them going after HR payroll. It was all about going after the CEOs because they earn more money. But now it goes after general staff as well. Another one, hi Jeff, recently changed my bank. I'd like to my direct deposit payroll information to be updated. What payday can the change be effective for? Regards. Now, is that a beginning of a BEC attempt, or is it simply a process of gathering intelligence so they know when your pay cycle is? Perhaps both. And then we started to see them going after the executive assistants of CEOs and the executive suite because they tend to have discretionary budget and to have corporate credit cards. And as usual, they like to swing into something that's current at the time. This is a couple of years old, but please get me some Google Play gift cards, $500 cards. I need 4 of them. We have some clients caught up in the California wildfire disaster. So every good fraud has 95% truth in it. It's that killer 5% that you've got to look out for. And to put a sense of urgency in it, scratch at the back to reveal the card codes and email me the codes. How soon can you get that done? So, and you know, this still happens. Sometimes I get contacted, and a few years ago, I've had been done since then, but this was one I captured a little bit of. I received a mate of mine reached out and said, "Hey, Brian, we've got a live BEC attempt on the hook," and it went to Matthew and Bo. It was sent to Bo. Bo picked up, which was great. He works in cybersecurity, so he understood. And it was all about making a payment today. So what he did was Bo responded to the crook and said and queried MG Design because I wasn't on their normal payment system. And he CC'd me in and said, Hazy CC'd in, he'll process the payment. So the crook was then going to reach out to me. When I went into the sender's details, it had nothing to do with Matthew. It was like an account jrdell@explorenet.ca, China. So then he had the crook then sent, this is where he wanted the payments to go into, $15,000 in its MG Premium account in a Westpac bank. I think this one was over in Western Australia, it might have been Victoria. And I then took over and I said, hey, Matt, can you confirm the bank details and bounce back? What I had done was contact Westpac and say, this account is a mule's account. It's been used to facilitate BEC fraud. Can you please shut it down? And what that does is, if the crook is trying to send 10 different transactions in that account, it prevents them from getting the money out and lets them start their own investigations. So straight away, the crook comes back and said, hi, B, please ignore the first bank details. This is a correct one. And gave me a new one. And I did exactly the same thing. I managed to get 3 out. Normally, you can get about 3 bank accounts. Now, if you imagine we all did that every day, we would actually dry up their money mules and make it very difficult. And that's one of the secrets, you know, we don't have to just accept it, but we've got to do more about it. That one was in WA. So we can fight back, but just don't try and do it yourself. Prevention is key. And to get our defenses in place, we need to understand that we will be targeted. Our finance teams in particular, and they will identify the executives in the business and use their names and identities. Never accept urgency reflected in an email. Never operate outside established practices when it comes to payments of money. Now, key is get on the phone quickly and speak to someone, okay? Verify who you're dealing with. And I'm going to come to this a little bit more shortly. And any changes to bank account details should never occur unless you have absolutely independently validated. Now, within the team, it's important to do a review of your current policies and processes to see if there are any gaps. You know, we've gone into organisations and found gaps in their systems that they didn't realize because they hadn't had something leak through. But it's very important to regularly do that. Develop golden rules within the team. So the quiet person is comfortable raising an issue and challenging the CFO if they're getting direction from them. How do we support each other? Put those, develop those in your golden rules that you are facing this as a team. You have an adversary. They act as a team. An organised crime syndicate is a team. Sometimes with 3 people, sometimes with 300 people. And develop your self-help tips, a little prompt that says, do this, validate your email, check for the senders thing. Little things that can make a massive difference to protect your environment. Because, as I said before, all BEC fraud can be prevented. It is, however, going to get more complex. Okay, it is because we are already starting to see the emergence of AI-generated video and audio.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things. So, for instance, they could have me say things like, I don't know, Killmonger was right, or Ben Carson is in the sunken place, or, how about this, simply, President Trump is a total and complete dipshit. Now, you see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time. Moving forward, we need to be more vigilant with what we trust from the internet.
Okay, and just recently there was a case where a CFO's voice was cloned and it led to a loss of $35 million. 35 million, that's a lot of bucks. But even only last week, there was this case. It happened in Hong Kong, where a worker in the finance team paid out 40 million, equivalent 40 million Australian dollars. He was involved with a video conference call with his CFO and other members of the team, multiple members of the team, and they were all fake. Every one of them was artificially intelligence generated, and all their voices were the same. So a lot of reconnaissance and research had gone into it. They acquired everything they needed, and it convinced this person that they had the authority to send $40 million. We're seeing more AI going into scams, and it's going to continue to grow. And, you think about it, we've been compromised in our real world. You just look at Medibank, Optus, and Latitude. Most of us have our real identities. When we look at what's happening on it, so many people, if you're on TikTok, you've probably surrendered your cyber identity, and they've got your biometrics, your voice, your face, of course, your video, and probably your dance move if that's what you're about. But it comes back to the fundamental is we need to validate everything. We cannot just trust in electronic communication and never transfer money without validation.
So Brian, just a quick one.
Yes.
I know we've been talking a lot about internal processes as well.
Yes.
What can dealers do to protect their customers, like in terms of validation in particular, or a customer's email being compromised and payments to the dealer being redirected, etc. Are there steps in terms of validation that dealers can take with their customers external to the business?
Look, that's a wonderful, wonderful, mature question. And I am shocked in this country we haven't seen more of approaches to how do you work with your customers. I won't even talk about some of the conversations I've had with banks over the years. But why do we not embrace our customers in our cyber safety portfolio and start to actually promote our organizations as a cyber safe and secure environment and sharing these lessons and making them part of our solution? So I think having information and resources on your websites or on your communications with clients about what you will and won't do, or prevention tips that you can share with them to raise it, is very important. And sometimes if, of course, you can be you're the dealer and the customers are receiving emails purporting to be from your business. So how do you communicate with the customers? We will never do this. We will always follow that. Or if you get a question of payment, please validate with our head office first. Do not use the phone number in the email communication. Contact us independently. Can we close every gap? Yeah, we can. We just got to look for them first and work on it. And sometimes there is a bit of effort involved, but for the longer term, it's absolutely worth the journey. But that's a great question, and it's about how I talk a lot about building a trusted ecosystem, and that's what that question lends itself to. We've got to understand that we are all moving parts, and we are part of an ecosystem that requires all of us to do the right thing, and it is going to take time to evolve to that. But by having the mindset and the courage and the preparedness and wherewithal to do it, then we can get started on it. And that's why I love these sessions with AADA, because this is absolutely starting to build that within the ecosystem of automobile dealers. So it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, keep going. What you were going to say before.
No, all I'm going to say is, and I'll say it again, is that it is all preventable, folks. And remember, it's all of our responsibility. We cannot simply just look after ourselves. We've got to look after our communities. In the broader sense. So I hope that makes sense. I'll shut up now and I'm happy to take any more questions.
If anyone's got any sort of follow-up questions or anything like that, you feel welcome to raise your hand or chuck them in the chat. I'll give you a second. Okay, I'm gonna unmute you, George. Okay, you should be able to talk now, George. If you unmute, I think your actual thing's on mute at the moment. There you go.
Hi, Brian. Thank you. That was a really useful and informative session. Are we going to be, Ashley, are we going to be getting this presentation sent to us, including all the slides and...
Yep, I'll email it through to you guys once I've processed the recording, and I'll get the slides off Brian to send through to you. Yeah, anyone who's registered to attend will get it. It'll also go up on the website, and you're more than welcome to share it amongst your team or whoever else wants to see it.
Thank you very much.
And George, don't hesitate to reach out if you've got a particular query that, we're here to support you. So please don't worry that if you ask me a question, I'm going to, hit you with an NDA and an invoice in the end of the day. We're part of a community. So, at the end of the day, I'm just a burnout copper, and I used to do a lot of this stuff at no cost. So I'm still a member of a community that believes in things such as this.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
Yes. All right, Brian, I think we've covered a lot today, covered a lot of ground again, and thank you so much for that. Yeah, as I kind of said, that recording I'll get through to you guys as soon as I've processed it, and I'll let you know when the next sort of webinar in this series is coming up very shortly. Thanks again, Brian, for all your expertise.
Thanks for everyone for giving up your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good arvo.